For the longest time, I used to fantasize about being needless, totally and utterly needless. It made me feel so good to pretend that I didn't need anything from anybody and that I could just live my whole life completely independent, having no needs that anybody else needed to fulfill apart from myself. I also used to fantasize about my partner not having any needs and that we could both just live our merry lives together, heads down, keep going, no hard conversations, no anything. Now, I learned the other day that your fantasies tell a lot about the areas in which you could consider working on in your life. And I realized that I'm fantasizing about having no needs. And when I picked that apart a little bit and sat with it, I realized that I wasn't fantasizing about having no needs, because that's impossible. I was fantasizing, the need underneath what I was fantasizing was that my needs would be fully met in the way that I wanted them to be. So I was fantasizing about not having to be a burden just because I had my needs and I had to express them. Hello, I'm Lewis, and I make videos on codependency, attachment theory, and all sorts of personal development topics. If that sounds like something you're interested in, then please hit like and subscribe. Here's the thing about being human: you will always have needs, and there's no getting around that. But when you're raised in a codependent family system, you're trained to think that your needs don't matter, and you're trained, therefore, not to know or to be aware of your needs, let alone how to fulfill them. Sometimes this can be done deliberately if there's a particular member of the family that is going to focus on all the attention and try and make you live up to and fulfill all their needs that obviously they didn't have met when they were a child. But sometimes it can be unintentional and it can just be a passed down way of living that's existed for generations. But as a child, your parents or your primary caregivers are your role models. And if they aren't able to show and to demonstrate how to meet their needs successfully and in a healthy way, then you're not going to learn that yourself. Because children are like sponges, they just absorb everything. And so, if you realize that you might be codependent, then there's a very strong likelihood that the entire rest of your family system is. So, your family system will train you not to be in touch with your needs and subtly expect for you to end up meeting someone else's needs. In classic codependent literature, this is an alcoholic. And basically, the alcoholic's need for alcohol and the behaviors that that causes take precedence over everything: the needs of their wife, husband, children, their job, everything. But it doesn't have to be that sort of addiction. It could obviously be drugs or alcohol, but it can be abuse, or a family member might be ill, or there may be some form of other addiction or just conditioning that means that it's basically forbidden to talk about your needs explicitly because someone else's needs are taking precedence. And it can even be the case that you've got a fairly normal family dynamic going on in your core family, but perhaps a generation back, you've got some issues like alcoholism or abuse that have then funneled down, and then your primary caregivers in your core family are acting these out unconsciously and unknowingly, and therefore it gets passed on to you. I think this is why often many of us grow up in what we think is a normal childhood and everything looks quite normal. You know, we had our physical needs met, but there are a lot more needs that a child has: emotional needs, intellectual needs, spiritual needs. And I think this makes it really hard when we're looking back at our family histories because we can see that the house was okay. I was never hit. I got an education. I got a good job. But something important was missing. And it makes it really hard to see that. So even in the most materially privileged of circumstances, a child still might not be getting all the needs that they have being met. Just look at the British royal family. So my main fantasy, as I said at the start, was about being needless. I used to think that what I wanted from life was just I would get through my education, finish that, do that perfectly, and then I would get a really tough, demanding job that would take up all of my time and energy, and I would just put my head down and work, and I would never ever have to look up. I thought I could ignore my feelings forever. But unfortunately, or fortunately really, I can't do that. My need to get in touch with my feelings and really all of my other needs kept coming up. And the more that I tried to push it down, the more that it kept coming up. And it found sneaky ways. It showed up not just in fantasies, but in real physical ways. I was horribly anxious. I would have anxiety attacks. I would be shaking. I would just go around feeling awful. And then through my initial year of therapy and training, I learned a phrase that I think just gets to the heart of this perfectly. Your needs are a gift. Your needs are a gift. They're not something to throw away and push down and neglect over there to the side. Your needs are a gift because they show you what you need to live a happy and healthy life. I'm sure you've seen this example in movies. So imagine you've got one of those like big fight shooty movies, and you've got the big guy who doesn't feel pain. And he's basically indestructible. He will just go on, push through anything because he doesn't feel pain, so he doesn't have to stop. But the way that that sort of character always gets killed off in those by the protagonist is that the protagonist finds some way to hurt this unfeeling person in a way that any normal person who feels pain would just stop and go, let me just deal with that. But the person who doesn't feel pain pushes on, and it slowly eats away at them and kills them because they didn't feel it. When you're codependent, you're a bit like that person who doesn't feel pain. And what happens is you'll be ignoring the pain, you'll be pretending it's not there, but it will keep coming up and it will keep coming up until it gets to the point where you can't ignore it. And often it will then cause your life to fall apart in ways that you really just didn't want to happen. So your needs are a gift, they are a blessing. They help you figure out what it is that you really need from your life. And I feel like when we're codependent, there's 3 things that we have to do to really get used to getting in touch with our needs. And these are noticing, surrendering, and building a relationship with our needs. So step 1, noticing. All healing, all change starts with noticing. And that's kind of obvious. How can you change something if you're not even aware of it? But noticing is extremely, extremely powerful. One of the best pieces of praise I always used to like getting from my therapist at the start was, that's some good noticing. And I was like, oh, yeah, it is. And often, one of the things that drives us to notice is pain. And so one of the most difficult things when you're first starting to heal, or when you're looking to take a next step in your healing, is getting in touch with the pain that you're currently feeling. Because that pain shows you a need that you're not filling in your life. Here's some very simple and effective ways to do that, because I hate doing it, if I'm really honest. I really don't like making time in my day to check in, pay attention to myself. It feels like, back to my microphone, it feels like it's useless and a waste of time, but it's not. I'm constantly training myself to do that. And the ways that I've found most effective are this. Set a reminder on your phone that just pops up randomly, or you can schedule it at individual times that just says, check in. And you don't have to do anything flashy. You can just look, oh, okay, and spend 10 seconds, 30 seconds going, how does my body feel? And what am I feeling? And what have I been thinking about? And 30 seconds. You've always got 30 seconds. The second step is a bit of a bigger one, which is that you can block specific time. Block time over lunch, block time after dinner perhaps, to do a proper scan of how you are and how you're feeling. Now there's no right way of doing that. Just do it. And then the most effective way, which I'm sure you've all heard of, is journaling. Journaling for me was initially like I must journal, but actually it's become a very freeing exercise, and journaling has helped me realize how much I need to express myself in the ways that I don't express myself outside of this lovely little A5 book that I've got. One good way that I've found to do journaling is to actually do it in the third person. It kind of makes it less awkward, or I have less resistance to doing it when I journal in the third person, especially when I'm thinking about my needs. So, for example, a journal entry might be, today Lewis woke up and he was feeling anxious about work. His body felt hot, but he was feeling cold. His mind was thinking about that work task that he needed to do for tomorrow, and he was worried that everyone would hate him because it showed things that didn't necessarily go the way that everyone wanted them to go. And you see how when you put that distance and do it in the third person, you develop that skill of self-reflection and you're less personally involved with it, so there's less resistance to doing it. And really, before I do the second and third steps, if you take one thing away from this video, it's that noticing and being aware is the key to healing. I'd even go so far as to say that awareness alone is curative. The second thing you can do when you want to get in touch with your needs is, once you've noticed them, you're going to realize that although you've noticed them, you're not doing anything differently. There's a meme that I love, which is the therapist says, "You're very self-aware." And then the person goes, "Yeah, that's the problem." And I feel like this is when we get stuck in our own noticing, but we don't actually take any action. And for me, as someone who I can take a lot of action, if there's one thing I can do, it's will myself and force myself through things. It doesn't work. There are times when it doesn't work. And when I found when it comes to meeting my needs and really changing and growing and doing things in a different way, of course I can't do it in the same way that I've always been doing it. And I've had to admit to myself that I am powerless to change certain things. And that's really hard to come to terms with. And if you get into any recovery programs, the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous, Codependence Anonymous, all those sorts of things is we admitted we were powerless and that our lives had become unmanageable. It's very powerful stuff. And then the third thing that you can do is start to build a relationship with your needs. You've noticed them, you've acknowledged the fact that you're going to have to surrender some things and accept that the way you're doing things isn't going to change how it's currently going. And now the third part is to really get in touch with what that need needs, because that is the change that you're going to have to make. Now, there's no right way or wrong way of doing this, and I'm talking in broad strokes, but I think as principles, these are really strong foundation to base your healing journey off. And you'll find that when you start getting in touch with your needs, you can almost start seeing them as different personalities within you. And this is called sub-personalities theory, and I'm going to make a whole video on this. I'm sort of psyching myself out of doing it because it's something that's so important to me and I want to do it perfectly. But it's a brilliant way of looking at yourself and of getting in touch with your needs and the parts of yourself that you haven't really developed a proper relationship with and that you've been pushing down. So that's everything for today. Good luck discovering your own needs and getting in touch with and fulfilling your own needs. All the best for your healing journey, and I will see you in the next video.